Thank you for your continued support to this channel.
A recent article by Jeremy Clarkson, if you can call it an article, to me is a racist, cruel, misogynistic, hateful speech piece. And this is just another tipping point in the British media. He's done this before in racial discrimination in 2015. And it's not my job as a woman of colour to speak to David and to convince him what Jeremy Clarkson said was racist.
Well, don't you want to engage in conversation with David to learn what he's thinking? No, you don't want to talk to him, Natalie, because I want to...
At the end of the day, I'm fed up of trying to explain to white people about racism. It's not my job to educate David. Okay. David came on radio stage with one intention, which is to tear down Meghan Markle.
Racism is a pervasive and insidious force that continues to shape the lives of millions. People of colour are forced to navigate a world rife with prejudice, discrimination, and microaggressions. Yet, they are often expected to shoulder the emotional labour of educating white individuals about the realities of racism. This expectation places an unfair burden on people of colour, demanding that they relive their trauma, explain their pain, and justify their existence. The emotional toll of this burden is immense. It can lead to feelings of exhaustion, frustration, and anger. It can also be re-traumatizing, forcing individuals to confront painful experiences and navigate hostile environments. This emotional labor is not a one-time occurrence, but rather an ongoing demand, a constant expectation to educate and enlighten. This expectation is rooted in a power imbalance, where the voices and experiences of people of color are often silenced or dismissed. It places the onus on the marginalized to educate the privileged, perpetuating a cycle where racism is not only experienced, but also explained and justified. This dynamic is unsustainable and unjust. It is not the responsibility of the oppressed to educate their oppressors. To understand the burden placed on people of color, it is crucial to acknowledge the systemic nature of racism. It is not merely about individual prejudice, but rather a deeply ingrained system of power and oppression. From slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, the history of the United States is intertwined with the legacy of racism. This legacy continues to shape the present, manifesting in disparities across all facets of life. People of color face discrimination in housing, education, healthcare, and employment. They are disproportionately targeted by law enforcement and the criminal justice system, most harmed by it. It also perpetuates a dynamic where white individuals are absolved of the responsibility to educate themselves and challenge their own biases. Imagine a world where the victims of a crime were expected to educate the perpetrators about the harm they inflicted. This is the absurd logic that underpins the expectation for people of color to educate white individuals about racism. It is not the responsibility of the marginalized to enlighten their oppressors. Instead, white individuals must take ownership of their own learning. They must actively seek out resources, engage in critical self-reflection, and challenge their own biases. This requires humility, a willingness to listen and learn, and a commitment to unlearning the racist ideologies that permeate society. The recent controversy surrounding Jeremy Clarkson's hateful remarks about Meghan Markle provides a stark example of how misogyny and racism operate in tandem. Clarkson's words, dripping with vitriol and contempt, were not merely an expression of personal opinion, but a reflection of deeply ingrained societal biases. His tirade, published in a mainstream publication, underscores the normalization of hate speech and the urgent need to hold individuals accountable for their words and actions. This incident is not an isolated one. It is part of a larger pattern of misogyny, a specific form of discrimination targeting black women at the intersection of racism and sexism. Meghan Markle, as a biracial woman navigating the white spaces of British royalty, has been subjected to relentless attacks, her every move scrutinized and criticized. The vitriol directed at her exposes the insidious nature of misogyny and the urgent need to dismantle the structures that perpetuate it. Clarkson's words are not just words, they have real-world consequences. They contribute to a climate of hostility and embolden others to engage in similar hateful rhetoric. This incident serves as a stark reminder of the power of language and the responsibility we all have to challenge hate speech in all its forms. The perpetuation of harm, how silence and inaction contribute to systemic racism. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. When we witness racism, sexism, or any form of discrimination and choose to remain silent, we become complicit in the perpetuation of harm. Our inaction sends a message that such behavior is acceptable, that it is not our place to intervene. This silence is deafening, allowing prejudice and discrimination to fester and grow. It is not enough to simply be not racist or not sexist. We must be actively anti-racist, anti-sexist, and anti-oppression. This requires speaking out against injustice, challenging discriminatory behavior, and using our voices to amplify the voices of the marginalized. Our silence protects the perpetrators, not the victims. It allows systems of oppression to continue unchecked and unchallenged. Breaking the silence is the first step towards dismantling these systems and creating a more just and equitable society. The importance of self-education, resources and avenues for white individuals to learn about racism. The journey towards becoming anti-racist begins with self-education. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, challenge our own biases, and actively seek out diverse perspectives. Fortunately, there are numerous resources available to facilitate this learning process. Books, articles, podcasts, documentaries, and online platforms offer a wealth of information on the history and impact of racism. Organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, Showing Up for Racial Justice, and Race Forward provide valuable resources and educational materials. Engaging with these resources is not a one-time task, but an ongoing process. It requires a commitment to continuous learning, self-reflection, and a willingness to challenge our own understanding of the world. From education to action, concrete steps for white allies to dismantle racism. Education is only the first step. It must be followed by action, by a commitment to dismantling the systems that perpetuate racism and creating a more just and equitable society. This requires moving beyond performative allyship and engaging in meaningful, impactful actions. Support organizations fighting for racial justice by donating your time, resources, or skills. Use your platform, no matter how small, to amplify the voices of people of color and challenge racist rhetoric. Advocate for policy changes that address systemic inequalities in housing, education, healthcare, and criminal justice. Remember that dismantling racism is not a destination, but a journey, a lifelong commitment to creating a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of the color of their skin. The role of accountability, challenging racism in ourselves and others. Accountability is crucial in the fight against racism. This involves holding ourselves and others accountable for our words and actions. It means acknowledging our own biases, apologizing for harmful behavior, and committing to doing better. When we witness racism, silence is not an option. We must speak up, challenge racist jokes and stereotypes, and interrupt microaggressions. This can be uncomfortable, but it is essential to creating a culture where racism is not tolerated. Holding others accountable also means calling out racism in our families, workplaces, and communities. It means having difficult conversations, challenging prejudice, and demanding better. Towards a just future, the collective responsibility in creating an anti-racist society. Creating an anti-racist society is a collective responsibility. It requires a fundamental shift in our understanding of race, power, and privilege. It demands that we move beyond individual acts of kindness and work towards dismantling the systems that perpetuate injustice. This is not a task for the faint of heart. It will require courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice. But it is a fight worth fighting, a future worth building. Let us move forward with hope, determination, and a shared vision of a world where everyone is treated with dignity, respect, and equality.